Welcome to Parenti Stuff, the podcast. I am your host, Lumpy Louise, and this is the read and discuss of Democracy for the Few, 9th edition. Chapter 8, The Last Environment. All right, so anyhow, we're on Chapter 8 of Democracy for the Few tonight, and Chapter 8 is The Last Environment. It's not going to be a long one. There's only 5 sections, and I don't know. I didn't do too long on in between, so it shouldn't be too long tonight. So in this chapter, Parenti is, of course, talking about the environment. It's called The Last Environment. And he is talking in particular about how the U.S. government protects corporations over the health of its people, the people of the world and the entire planet, and basically every living creature and thing in it. Let's see. So once again, this book was written in 2010, so keep that in mind. So there was, some stories I'm trying to do, that happened after that. So I'll talk about some of that stuff. So I don't normally I don't in particular like to do a comparison of like China and US, but in this particular case with the environment, I will be after section 5 actually kind of talking just because it was either I was going to have to go to the SOC Dem countries, which there's a lot of greenwashing and stuff there. So like I was looking at the Chinese model of like what they've been doing and at least they are trying to make an impact, and for the fact that they're they say they're going to go back to socialism by 2050. So they actually have that stuff in mind when they're setting this stuff up. So I'm just going to kind of, compare those two, but I wouldn't normally do that. But I also, because of that, there was this article. So this article was last week, and it was Elon Musk warns Chinese rare earth restrictions may delay Tesla robots. And so first thing in my head, I'm just like kind of laughing, like, haha, he can't make his robots. Hey, Moxie. Hello everyone. So I was like, but I'm like, I know with these, usually when you have a title of an article and there's China in it, it just, it can be a little off. Like they could be, saying something, but there's something else behind it. So I'm like, I was wondering if the rare earth restrictions had come from anything they were doing for the environment, which is kind of a yes and no, more of a no, but a little bit of a yes. So what I dug into, and I honestly didn't, I'd have to look at this, much more extensively than I did just this weekend, So what I find out is, I remembered that there was stuff about the rare materials, from years ago. So I was like, what is actually going on? So, I went back and I saw some articles in 2019, and what was happening was China actually developed. So what happened is in 1990, China kind of got into the mining of these rare materials that, they're obviously used like in electronics and stuff. And that's when, the boom was happening with computers and everything. So they got into that. And when they were doing that, they had, there was a bunch of smaller companies that were not, always following the regulations and everything. And so it did a lot of damage to the land and stuff. And so back in 2019, what China was trying to do was trying to clean that up. They were kind of asking for, the corporations that actually profited off of this to help with the cleanup. I'm not entirely sure. I'm highly doubting any of the Western companies did anything. I don't know if anything came out of the China companies. I didn't go down that route. But also when I'm reading about that, the thing is that China pulls, I was getting all these different fluctuation of numbers. So somewhere between 56% and 80% of the world's, like outside, they export these rare minerals, and they're able to do this because they actually developed a way to do it now. Like at first, they got rid of the small companies that were actually like hurting the land and stuff. So they have this way of doing it, and it's actually faster, but also more sustainable. I don't know exactly how much sustainable, but it's not something that any other country has the ability to do at this moment. They don't have the technology to do it. So in the United States, we had the one mine, and then there was like a question whether it was closing or not closing. I don't know if that was going over in the last 5 years too. But we just okayed a mine. I think it's on the Utah, California, like somewhere around Utah, California. We okayed a mine there. So as I'm saying, like it's not entirely, because China was doing this environmental stuff, but it does come because China has that technology of doing it a little better. So that might be a little bit of a sticking point too of going on with this. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I every time I bring something like that up, I have to laugh, and because I remember this tweet where Iranians say, what wasn't good for the people is the U.S. government, organizing a coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia so you could obtain the lithium there, and Elon Musk just saying, we will coup whoever we want, deal with it. So, yeah, those are, just wanted to share that. Hold on one second. Let me just take that off. Okay, so I'm sorry if you're hearing a lot of outside noise. I have my window open. But let's see, where are we at? All right, so I wanna read a little bit from this article. So this is the EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin says Trump deregulatory actions won't have adverse effects on people and the environment. This is from last Tuesday, from April 22nd. It's up on CBS News. It was in conjunction with the Face the Nation, which was playing that day. So, all right. So they say, this is the article, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin said Sunday that he can absolutely guarantee Trump administration deregulations won't have adverse health effects on people and the environment. And we have to both protect the environment and grow the economy, Zeldin said on Face the Nation. As part of the President Trump's pledge to unleash American energy, Zeldin announced in March, that the EPA would reconsider rules across a number of sectors, including regulations on power plants, on mercury, I hate that word, and air toxic standards that target coal-fired power plants, and on wastewater regulations for the development of oil and gas. The Trump administration touted the 31 deregulatory actions as the most momentous day in EPA history, which I think a lot of these things they rolled back, because there was something like 200 rollbacks in his first term, and then Biden went in and unrolled back the rollback or something like that. I don't know what you call that. But like, so I don't know how it's the most momentous when they've done this stuff before. But anyhow, the decisions are the start of what's expected to be a years-long effort to repeal or revise dozens of environmental rules, much to the dismay of climate experts and advocates. Zeldin, who formerly represented New York in the House, said at the time of the announcement that today the Green News scam ends, while pledging that the EPA will do its part to usher in the golden age of American success. So while Zeldin says the policy changes won't have adverse health effects, the Environmental Protection Network, a group of former EPA employees found otherwise. They analyzed EPA data of 12 of the 31 proposed rollbacks and estimate that air pollution would increase as a result of the deregulation that would lead to nearly 200,000 premature deaths and cause more than 10,000 asthma attacks every day in America. All right, so that's all I wanted to read on that article. You can check out the rest if you want. I stopped there because they kind of like start saying, oh, Biden and Harris were like doing all these wonderful things. But all I have to say to that is they did all these wonderful things after Trump has been in office, and there's a good chance that he could be in office again, and didn't like put any protections on any of that stuff. So Rick is down in the comments saying rare earth minerals are a wide category, so it really depends on which ones you're including. Yeah, that's true too. Then the for the EPA, some of the rollbacks. Let's see. This is they put it out an article under the EPA on March 12th, and they just have a bunch of stuff listed. So like reconsideration of regulations on power plants, on oil and gas industry, on the mercury and air toxins, the greenhouse gas reporting program, limitation guidelines and standards for the steam electric power generating industry, wastewater regulations, and risk management program. They're going to roll all that back. Then there's things about, like the cars. They're going to roll back the electric vehicle mandate, and like a whole bunch of other stuff like that. So that is what they're doing. Let me play section 1 right now. Hold on. I gotta jump to the page. And
Chapter 8. The Last Environment. Those of privileged and powerful means believe they have a right to use as they wish whatever natural resources still remain on the planet, while passing off their diseconomies onto others. They seem unaware that the planet's very survival is at stake. Toxifying the Earth. Like sin, environmental degradation is regularly denounced but vigorously practiced. Every year industry dumps over 1 billion pounds of toxins, including carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, mercury, and hundreds of other noxious substances into our environment. Corporations do this not because they want to sicken people and destroy the planet but because they want to minimize costs and maximize profits. Industry introduces about 1,000 new chemicals into the marketplace annually, often with unreliable information about their effects. Each year some 10,000 spills from pipelines and tankers spread millions of gallons of oil into our coastal waters, taking a dreadful toll as the oil works its way through fish, spawning and animal breeding cycles. Rainforests throughout the world, with their precious stock of flora and fauna, are being turned into wastelands. Less than 20% of the world's original forest cover remains today, mostly in Russia, Canada, and parts of South America and Africa, almost all of it threatened by rapacious clicutus. In the United States, more than 96% of the ancient redwood forests have been wiped out by fast-buck timber companies. As the trees disappear, so do the spawning streams and distinctive menagerie of life. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that every year up to 400,000 acres of wetlands in the United States are obliterated by commercial farming and developers. The Last Environment 91. The industrial production of meat fouls vast areas of land and waterways with waste runoff and preempts millions of acres for livestock feed. According to one report, meat consumption is the most environmentally harmful activity consumers can engage in, except for operating a gas-driven car. Fast-buck exploitation of the planet's resources and population explosion have brought more toxic effusion, ecological disruption, and an extinction rate of 17,500 species of plants and animals every year. By overfishing, large commercial fleets are wiping out the world's marine life and driving out small-scale fishermen. Many widely used chemicals are endocrine disruptors and hormone mimickers. Working their way into the food chain, they undermine our health and genetic viability. In the United States, toxic waste dumps and incinerators are situated predominantly in or near low-income African American, Latino, and Native American communities, contributing to inordinately high cancer rates among these populations. High levels of leukemia and brain and testicular tumors have been found among children who live near utility power plants and toxic sites. Over the last several decades, the rate of cancer among American children has been rising by double digits. A newborn child faces a risk of about 1 in 600 of contracting cancer by age 10. Since 1940, breast cancer rates among women have tripled. An estimated 50,000 to 100,000 deaths each year in the United States are caused by air pollution. The number of asthma sufferers has been increasing at the alarming rate of 50% each decade as air quality continues to deteriorate. As of 2007, 6.7 million children and 16.2 million adults suffered from asthma in the United States. More than 45 million Americans are drinking and bathing in water that is ridden with parasites and toxic chemicals. Excess lead levels have been found in the drinking water of 1 of every 5 Americans, contributing to hypertension, strokes, heart ailments, and learning disabilities. In some neighborhoods, tap water was found to contain remnants of rocket fuel. 2 studies warn that mother's breast milk can contain traces of chemical flame retardant 8. On average, each person's body carries measurable levels of 50 to 80 or more toxic chemicals. These contaminants are probably the leading cause of death in the United States. Sometimes toxins are poured not into the environment but directly into our bodies. Thus silicofluorides, a toxic waste product, is used for fluoridation. Most of the US population is subjected to compulsory fluoridation in their drinking water because it supposedly protects children from tooth decay. But Sweden, Germany, Norway, Netherlands, Denmark, and France stopped using fluoridation over 25 years ago. Communities in Finland, East Germany, Cuba, and Canada that stopped using fluoride actually showed a decrease in tooth decay. Fluoridation causes fluorosis, which consists of severe tooth enamel loss, pitting, and discoloration. As it accumulates in the body, fluoride becomes increasingly toxic, having been linked to thyroid and neurological disorders, reproductive afflictions, bone fractures, Alzheimer's, and cancer. 6 million acres of irreplaceable topsoil are eroded yearly by chemical farming. The use of toxic herbicides and pesticides has doubled over the last few decades, with high levels found in foods and drinking water, risking birth defects, liver and kidney diseases, brain damage, and cancer, not to mention the loss of fish, birds, and trees. Homeowners drench their yards and lawns with many times more herbicides and insecticides per acre than even farmers use, killing many useful insects that aerate the soil and pollinate plants. The more chemicals that are poured into the environment, the more that are needed. For example, forest and lawn pesticides kill the songbirds that eat bugs, thereby removing a natural pest control and causing greater infestation, which in turn creates a greater reliance on pesticides. Pesticides produce generations of insects increasingly resistant to chemical controls, which necessitates more potently toxic chemicals. The result is that over a 35-year period, pesticide use has increased tenfold, yet crop losses to insects and other pests have almost doubled. Chemical companies like Monsanto would want it no other way. Their goal is not to make things all better and then go out of business. It seems they prefer to market a product that increases the very conditions for its expanded use. The last environment 93. After a 9-year study, the EPA concluded that the most widely used pesticide, atrazine, along with other pesticides, might have unacceptable impacts on the environment and our health, causing abnormalities in the human endocrine system. Along with pesticides are the chemical fertilizers that are used abundantly with much damage to the soil and little benefit to crop yield. Since 1984, the production of the world grain staples that most of humanity survives on has been falling behind population growth.
Okay, all right. Let me see 1 second, get to my notes. Okay, so that was section 1, Toxifying the Earth. For this section, since what we just heard about from Parenti was written about 15 years ago, I was thinking on the subjects I could touch on, like microplastics, Chevron and the Donzinger stuff, health issues, water defenders, fracking, cancer alleys, whatever. But I was like, you know what? I kind of want to look at Flint. And Flint, you could be like, all right, that was more just the government doing stuff and the corporations not benefiting, but there were corporations that benefited off it, in the end too. But let me see. So just for background, I'll just quickly go through. So like in June of 2012 to April 2013, Flint was looking for a cheaper way to get water. So they were on the Detroit water sewage system, and they found this, if they could connect to the Carignan Water Authority, so they would have to build the pipeline to connect there, they would save like $200 million over 25 years. Okay? So, so they decide to go and do that. So on April 25th, then Detroit's like, okay, so we're shutting off the water in a year then. So, but the the pipeline wasn't connected yet. So they had to switch over. And what they did is they switched to the Flint River water, which they used to use back in like the 1960s. So they switched over to that. And this was with much dismay because, like, I know, like, growing up near Boston, like, if someone was saying we're going to now get our water from the Charles River and it's nice and clean now, we're going to just get the, the water from there. I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not using that water. So, yeah, they didn't. You're right, Rick. They didn't pH adjust the water. Like they should have gone in and they had to like add some chemicals and stuff to adjust the whole water, and they didn't do that either. Yeah. So then they switched on April 25th, and by May the residents are already complaining. So like just a couple of weeks later, they're already getting all these complaints about a smell and a color of the water. And, you can look at pictures and you can see like the water is like yellow and brown and stuff. So by August of that year in 2014, there was E. coli and total coliform bacteria detected. And then on October 13th, the General Motors plant said they are going to stop using Flint River water because it was corroding the metal. So they had like it was hurting their cars. So that it not like anything to do with the people. It was hurting their cars in October. This went on. They kept like gaslighting the people. They end up getting the TTHM. I'm not gonna try to say the name about the full name of that, but this is making them sick. This is giving their children like learning disabilities and stuff. Rick's saying the acidity was leaching lead from the pipes. Rick, do you want to come up? You want to talk a little bit about it? And so this was going on, and these people, like, I just remember the gaslighting and everything like that. So hold on one second, I just want to put my headphones on. Okay, all right, I'm gonna let Rick in because he'll I don't know why this takes me forever to like pull up anything. I'm on the computer in the studio. Hey,
It
Rick.
takes extra long.
I know.
Yeah, so like when the the water they were getting from Detroit was already treated. And they have like, a little sub treatment plant where they like filter it one more time and then send it back out. And then they just switched it over to the river water. They were filtering it, sending out, and they were like, "No, it's fine because it doesn't have high levels of particulate in it. It doesn't have all the levels were below a certain thing, but the acidity being at the high end of the acceptable, it's not going to kill you scale, which is like how they measure the water. Like, is it going to kill you? Like, no, okay." It started leaching all the lead from the pipes, and so all of the people started getting severe lead poisoning and other heavy metals and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. The thing is, like when people are like, well, the Flint water is still dirty, it's because they fixed the acidity problem, but the pipes are still lead, right?
Yeah.
It's not that they're not leaching lead into the water anymore. It's just that the lead that's being leached into the water is considered like not the city's fault. And this is like all across this whole section of the Midwest. Like all of these cities have lead. Like Milwaukee has lead in the pipes. Like Detroit has lead in the pipe. Like Chicago has lead pipe. It's all over the place. Like there's still severe
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
problems with that, especially in residential. Like that stuff doesn't get switched out ever because there's no like concerted effort that's being made by
Yep.
anybody. Um, yeah, and that guy. That's the reason we got Big Gretch. That's the reason Gretchen Whitmer ended up winning the governor's race is because they attached that whole Flint water thing to Rick
Schneider.
Schneider.
Yeah, and he like so they're gonna have the case against him, and then they drop the case too. So, like, it, like none of the residents have gotten any money. I looked again because the article I was looking at was from 10 years, because it was the 10 year, so it was last year. But now they just passed the 11 year, just a few days ago, and Yeah, they're still having issues, and it's still just none of the residents getting any money. And it's so funny because the Veolia North America was one of the engineering, the big engine. It's like a $1.3 billion engineering corporation all over America, and them and another smaller company are the ones that like said, "Oh, this will work," and so they have a site because they're like they paid $200 million out and no one's gotten any money. I think the whole payment that's come out so far is 626 million, and no one's gotten any money. But like 100,000 residents, and like that's you have to pay the lawyers and all that. So what are you saying? Like if you can't come down to it, what are you saying? Like each resident gets like $6,000? Like how is that
Yeah.
helping anything?
But they didn't even get that. What they got was like crates of water, like
Yeah,
sweltering in church basements.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like that's basically what happened. Is like they set a bunch of bottled water there, and they were like, "Well, maybe whatever." And eventually, they started pHing the water, and that's it. Like nothing got fixed. No, it's the same. Like where the town I live in, the water comes out and it's probably about to again. It's springtime, so
yeah,
pretty soon here they're gonna flush the thing. And twice a year the water comes out like brown out of my taps. You have to like run it until it comes out clear again. And
yeah,
it's uh not molybdenum, manganese is the problem actually. It's like iron and manganese from the system, and they're just like, no, we just like flush it out every once in a while. Just don't drink it when it comes out brown. Or they'll like sometimes they'll like warn you, put little door hangers, and be like, on
yeah,
next Thursday we're gonna. And it's been like that for a decade, and they're like there's like no investment in public infrastructure. And Flint is not just the water either. If you've ever been to Flint, it has possibly like the worst roads of any, like certainly any northern city I've been in. Like I've
yeah,
seen some way worse roads in like the deep south, but like it's bad. Like the roads are really bad. And
yeah.
they do that on purpose because the car industry in particular doesn't want their roads to be too nice because they make more money when your car breaks.
Yep, yep. That's a whole nother thing. Yep. They love leaving potholes and stuff around. So yeah, you have to get new tires, and then it hurts your car and stuff. Yep.
But this is the thing, is like when they fix the water system, they don't want to fix it in a way that like allowed them to get cheap water from the city.
Yep.
Okay, there's another thing that's context for all of this, is that Michigan has this extremely neoliberal water law that kind of works the same way as like the post office law that like Nixon passed in the 70s,
Okay.
where the water systems in the city cannot be funded by taxes. So
Okay.
like the water has to be paid for by the consumers of the water. And so the only way they can build new infrastructure is if they get a loan and pay it back with the water bills that you have to pay,
Yeah.
right? Like you have to pay the water bills back. The kids, so like there is no there's no tax money being invested into the water infrastructure at all. In fact, they're not even allowed to do that. So I learned about this because I bought a house on a tax auction that had been abandoned for like a decade, and it was like this tiny little one bedroom little cabin, but I got it for $1,300 or 1,500 with like the fees and everything. So it was like $1,500 for like a little plot of land with like a tiny whatever on it. And then
Yeah.
they wanted to charge me $70 a month for the water, even though the water wasn't turned on. And I was like, what is going on here? They're like, well, we built a bunch of water infrastructure when this town was growing before they shut down the factories. So it's like a whole other thing. But like deindustrialized place, they shut down the factories, but the water infrastructure is enough for like 30,000 people, but there's only like 2,000 people who live there. So everybody has to pay like massive fees just because of the pipes in the ground,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it wasn't subsidized by the state, because it's all it's got to be paid for at the consumer end by law. That's like a Michigan state law that causes that. And so like that's the other thing, is that like they couldn't just be like, oh yeah, we'll have like the state like subsidize and build out the water infrastructure. They're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm thinking like there's different things in every. It's not even state by state either. Sometimes it's like towns or district. You know what I mean? Like it can be totally different too in each place. Like sewage. We're hooked up to the towns, but there's then when I was living just a half mile up the street, we had to have like I had to have a tank. So I had to pay for the tank and have that kept up and stuff like that. So yeah, yeah. Do you want to stay up, or
I'll drop back down.
you don't have to? You can stay up and talk.
Okay.
All
Either
right.
way.
All right. Well, I'm gonna start playing section 2.
ECO Apocalypse. The Earth itself is beginning to lose its natural ability to remove air pollutants. There exists in the atmosphere a highly reactive oxygen compound, a free radical known among chemists as a molecular scavenger. This key molecule cleanses the air by attacking and transforming many of the gases it bounces into. Concentrations of this vital scavenger have decreased by 10% worldwide over a 20-year period. The life support systems of the entire ecosphere, the planet's thin skin of air, water, and topsoil and its finite supply of material resources, are threatened by global warming, endless capitalist industrial expansion, and massive population growth. Global warming is caused by motor vehicle exhaust and other fossil fuel emissions that create a greenhouse effect, trapping heat close to the Earth's surface. The last several decades have produced the warmest years on record. By 2004, emissions of greenhouse gases reached an all-time high, nearly double the average annual rate. These buildups are altering the climatic patterns on which we depend for our rainfall, resulting in record hurricanes, windstorms, droughts, and floods. In northern climes as well as warmer ones, rising temperatures have diminished soil moisture and rainfalls, disrupting the forest's ability to renew itself. The consequent increase in drought and forest fires only adds to the warming. Atmospheric warming is leading to the disappearance of freshwater sources in many parts of the world, causing life-threatening disaster for millions. Drought and overuse have led to serious water shortages in almost every area of the United States, not just the usually parched Southwest. Reservoirs have dropped to record lows. Waterfalls have disappeared. River basins and lakes are shrinking. Underground aquifers, the source of 60% of U.S. freshwater, are being depleted. Industrial expansion and the population boom create an additional drain on water supplies, while contributing directly to greater greenhouse emissions and more global warming. The meltdown of permafrost in the northern climes releases vast amounts of carbon dioxide and methane that further accelerate the heat buildup, creating a cycle that feeds on itself. Global warming is causing the Antarctic and Arctic ice caps and Greenland glacier to melt. Arctic ice caps act as reflector shields against the sun's rays. As they melt away, the Earth absorbs still more of the sun's heat, causing still more meltdown. The melting of the ice caps brings a dramatic rise in sea levels, causing them to swallow up shorelines and small islands, and disrupt natural ecosystems, threatening to flood large sectors of the globe. By exacerbating flooding and drought, global warming causes more than 300,000 deaths and about $125 billion in economic losses each year. The increased death rates are from illnesses including malnutrition, diarrheal disease, malaria, and various heat-related ailments. The vast amount of fresh water released into the oceans from this meltdown is smothering the Atlantic Gulf Stream. Deprived of Gulf Stream warmth, much of Europe and North America could be transformed into frigid land masses that would be able to feed but a tiny fraction of their present populations. The Gulf Stream is already showing signs of slowing down, and Europe experienced one of its coldest winters in 2005-2006. The same slowdown of currents is occurring in the Pacific Ocean. Unless we move swiftly and massively away from fossil fuels and develop sufficient wind, solar, and tidal power, the compounding feedback effects of global warming are likely to bring utter catastrophe to the entire planet. Some experts believe it is already too late. Unfortunately, during his occupancy of the White House, George Bush took no action that might cut into the profits of the oil companies. Instead, the White House muzzled scientists at NASA and at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration who were pointing to an impending ecological catastrophe. Beset by a profound economic crisis into the second year of his administration, President Barack Obama was unwilling or unable to pursue any kind of ecological master plan that could bring a dramatic reversal. The American Clean Energy and Security Act of 2009 aims at reducing greenhouse emissions 17% by 2020. Other provisions include new renewable requirements for utilities, new energy efficiency incentives for homes and buildings, and grants for green jobs, all steps in the right direction but relatively small steps. Also of concern is the shrinkage of the ozone layer that envelops the planet. Ozone-depleting chemicals, chiefly chlorofluorocarbons, are emitted into the Earth's atmosphere every year. Ozone depletion causes excessive ultraviolet radiation, which in turn disrupts the DNA of plants and humans and depresses the human immune system. Excessive ultraviolet radiation damages trees, crops, coral reefs, and fish, and is destroying the ocean's phytoplankton, a source of about half this planet's oxygen. If the oceans die, so do we. The top 5 CFC polluters in the United States are corporate military contractors. U.S. space shuttles have seriously damaging effects on the ozone layer, yet the space program goes on and on. In 2003, scientists announced that the ozone depletion rate had slowed down significantly thanks to the international ban on CFCs. However, because CFCs have very long atmospheric lifetimes, ranging from 50 to over 100 years, and some nations have not banned them, full recovery of the ozone layer is expected to take the better part of this century, assuming we have that much time. Pollution.
Okay. All right. I don't know what's going on. I just got a message and I don't know what it said. It said viewers might not be able to hear you. So, yeah. So that was the eco apocalypse. If I could talk tonight, it would be nice. In a previous chapter, we discussed America's push for cars over public transportation and how that was all lobbied for by different groups formed around the industry. And what you were just talking about, Rick, with Flint having the bad roads, like all plays into that whole thing too. So the issue with the push for cars that are reliant on fossil fuels, and currently the electric cars are not. They're not doing much better because our energy all mainly comes from fossil fuels. So it's not like it's saving us to be the push to electric cars. So it's all coming to roost. So this was a post from Grist, which is like it's like a journalist blog or something, but it's been around for like 25 years on the environment. And they just said a forthcoming Supreme Court decision is poised to weaken a bedrock law that requires federal agencies to study the potential environmental impacts of major projects. The case 7 County Infrastructure Coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado, concerns a proposed 88-mile railroad that would link an oil-producing region of Utah to tracks that reach refineries in the Gulf Coast. And we already know how ill the Gulf Coast is with all this stuff. Environmental groups and a Colorado county argue that the Federal Surface Transportation Board failed to adequately consider climate, pollution, and other effects as required under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, in approving the project. In 2023, the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the challengers, so they were going to stop the project. But the groups behind the railroad project, including several Utah counties, appealed the case to the highest court, which is expected to hand down a decision within the next few months. And as we know, they're already rolling back the NEPA again, so... yeah, that was one of the things Trump tried to do in his first term too. So, yeah, so I just had a couple of notes here. Like the U.S. has an endangered species list of 2,766, like the very vital ones. And over 90% of those species are affected greatly by climate change. 55 years ago, the U.S. celebrated its first Earth Day. That's on the 24th or 25th, 24th, I think. Since then, carbon dioxide levels have increased by 30% and is on average, different U.S. regions are, so yeah, on average, because different regions are experiencing it differently, obviously. And then we are 2.8 degrees hotter on average in the United States than we were in 1970. And the tornado activity has picked up greatly, and the increase in weather events can destroy crops. So by 2050, they think 80 million more people are suspected to be pushed into hunger. So do you have anything to add to that, Rick? Are you at your mic or no?
Yeah, I mean, just like very recent news. the reason there was a power outage in Spain, like almost all of Spain and parts of Portugal and France
Hmm.
lost power because of uneven heating across their power grid caused the
Oh,
frequencies to crash, and that's partly due to climate change.
yeah,
And so, like, the thing that's interesting about this is that it's not just like if capitalists had a more long term thinking about it, they would be doing something about climate change because there is a hard limit, and there's a one of the guys from Extinction Rebellion um, was going on this long lecture he has about the space. They say that like at I'm assuming what you listed was in Fahrenheit, but like um, at 3 degrees Celsius of climate change, like global capitalism won't be able to function. Like the ability for oil companies to get goods from one end of the planet to the other and refine them will be limited by the increase in things like natural disasters. When
yeah,
hurricane season is too long, you won't be able to pump oil out of the bed of the Gulf if it's always hurricane season. You're not going to be able to like do these transits. Like the electrical grids will start to fail. The roads themselves, like yes, it helps the car companies to let the roads go into disrepair. But if they're too shitty to get the goods that you need to make the car parts in on, then they're not.
yeah,
You're just hurt yourself in the
yeah,
long run. And this is the kind of thinking that is the issue. Like that's what we're dealing with is
yeah. Well, that's
the short-term profits have overcome long-term profits even.
yeah. So that's why I was gonna at the end. I'm kind of gonna look at like China versus United States because even like we can say like China's not like socialist right now, but like they are like when you look at it, you see that they are looking ahead. Unlike even when you look at some of the SOCDEM countries and what they're doing, I don't feel like they're entirely looking ahead because they're using a lot of greenwashing. So they're using a lot of band aids and stuff like that, not long time fixes for these things.
Norway is maybe the poster child for that because they've been funding. They have like the highest uh, depth of electric vehicles in Europe, but they also have like half of their government is funded off of an oil company, right? So like,
Yeah,
it's like okay, cool, like nice of you guys to like have electric cars that you're essentially just paying for with oil money.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, let's listen to section 3.
Solution for profits. Profits are higher when corporations can unload their diseconomies onto the environment. Luxury cruise ships dump hundreds of thousands of gallons of the last environment 95 wastewater on each trip they make. Cargo and container ships illegally dump tons of oily toxic sludge into the ocean on a regular basis, causing serious devastation of marine life. About 40,000 acres of coastal wetlands, providing spawning and feeding areas for most commercial fishing, are disappearing each year. Tons of nitrogen and phosphorus excess running off from farms, cattle feedlots, and city sewers, and airborne nitrates from automobiles and power plants, cause massive algae blooms that create dead zones of oxygen-less water in our bays, estuaries, and ocean shorelines. The costs of industrial effluents and the costs of developing new water sources are passed on to the public, so are the costs of cleaning up radioactive sites, and tending to the sickness and disease caused by pollution. Strip mining and deforestation by coal and timber companies continue to bring ruination to wildlife and watersheds. U.S. mining companies are now resorting to mountaintop removal, a radical strip mining process that blows off the entire top of a mountain to get at the coal in a quicker, more profitable way. Whole mountain ranges consisting of some 500 mountaintops ranging across West Virginia, and Kentucky, once rich in freshwater, wildlife, and tree cover, are transformed into barren moonscapes. About 1,200 mountain streams have been buried beneath dumped rock and dirt. Toxic runoff leaches from the mines into the groundwater, and sediments from denuded lands pour into waterways and fisheries. Landslides wash away homes and entire hamlets. U.S. regulations forbid the dumping of industrial waste into rivers and streams. But under the Bush administration, the mining company's massive mountaintop debris was reclassified as fill material that could be freely dumped, with much destruction to streams and countryside. An 1872 mining law is still the law of the land. It allows mining companies to dig out gold and copper on public lands without paying any royalties and observing only minimal environmental protection. What the law has left in its wake is a battered landscape of abandoned mines and poisoned streams. A new bill that would require mining companies to pay royalties and observe environmental safeguards was pending in Congress in 2009.24. Industrial toxins, including lead, arsenic, cadmium, and dioxin, along with radioactive wastes, are increasingly being recycled as fertilizer to be spread over farm fields and grazing lands nationwide. In some states, agribusiness companies have succeeded in passing food disparagement laws that allow them to sue anyone who questions the safety of their products. Whether they win or not, such litigious threats have a chilling effect on critics. Companies like Monsanto have a long record of releasing toxic wastes into unsuspecting communities, then covering up their actions for decades. Monsanto's sorghum plant was the world's leading producer of polychlorinated biphenyls, a substance linked to cancer, mental disability, birth defects, and immune disorders. For years Monsanto concealed studies that found PCBs unsafe. Their vile substance was finally banned in 1970. At least 44 Monsanto properties qualify as Superfund toxic sites. Pesticide companies and their compliant bureaucrats in the federal and various state agricultural departments will suddenly designate harmless insects like the gypsy moth and the light brown apple moth, creatures that have been around for decades, as a lethal menace to crops and foliage. They then promote aerial spraying of whole communities, putting whole populations at risk, especially children and the elderly.
Okay. Yeah, let me see what I have for notes on that. So that was Section 3, Pollution for Profits. In 2015, Arsarco, a copper smelting plant in Arizona, was fined $13.5 million for noncompliance in the years of 2005 to 2015. But how much, even with that fine, did they profit? In 2023, Associate Professor at University of Wisconsin, Nathan Atkinson, rewrote the model of the computer program that the EPA uses to calculate what that profit would be, and came out with a number of $32.5 million. So Arsarco made a $19 million profit, which is weird since the EPA's own policy is any penalty should, at a minimum, remove any significant economic benefits resulting from noncompliance. And I would say, only getting fined, less than half is not really, any real hit to the economic benefits, So according to the Energy Profits Org in 2024, did you want to say something on that, Rick?
No, I just want to point out that these guys are it's like you have the smoke monster from Fern Gully running our economics system. Is he starts talking about mountaintop removal, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Why? And then you remember, and then I think of all the pictures I've seen of it, and I'm just like, yeah, no, they're literally
blowing off the mountaintops.
They're we should spray pesticides over a whole neighborhood because it'll prevent those bugs from existing at all in the region, and then we don't have to, it's evil stuff.
I remember when the spraying would come down, and they'd be spraying the neighborhood, and I don't know, even kind of my parents were kind of okay, everybody should just get inside. like that was going to help us, Yeah, they don't think of this, that stuff at all. My father was drafted into the Army in the early 60s after he graduated college. And that is when they were making, Agent Orange. But what Agent Orange first they were using it for was around the base. They were using it as a weed killer. And they were and of course my father says it was always, a black guy that had to do it, but he's out there, spraying around the trees and everything. And I wonder too, I have a whole bunch of health issues, and this is before I was conceived. So, is there something in that, Yeah, this stuff is just nasty.
That was one of the things that, because I visited one of the Agent Orange victims in Vietnam. They have these things set up where they make art and I visited a thing like they like go about like some of the history of it, and like they were saying that like a lot of the soldiers there that were getting sprayed by the American troops, they knew that they were risking their lives already, and they're like whatever. But the thing that they didn't know is that it would be passed on to their children, and like all like that's like where like a lot of the effects are, is in like childhood deformities and stuff like that. So like you might be on something a little bit. It is very much.
Yeah. Well, my good friend growing up, her father was in the Navy. So the Navy didn't really go into Vietnam, but they had the ships out, out there, and they were, to refuel planes or whatever they do with them. But he was out in the Navy on the ship, and he'd say like they go and they'd spray it. The next morning they'd wake up and there was just like a powder on the ship. Like they were poisoning their own, soldiers too. Like they didn't care. They really didn't care. So according to the Energy Profits org in 2024, the profit for the leading 5 oil companies was $102 billion. And 2024 was the hottest year on Earth on record so far. I was looking through their website a little bit, and they have like these legal cases that are pending. And I look and I just see the first 2 that they had listed was like Bucks County against BP and City of Chicago against BP, and both of them are just saying like disinformation campaign. And so I kind of wanted to look a little bit more into that, and they actually had something on their site about it. So they had a article announcing intention to abandon renewables. BP misleads investors by blaming low carbon strategy for poor performance. It's not a secret that oil and gas giant BP has been underperforming compared to its industry peers, but the company has long attempted to place the blame on its low carbon energy strategy and climate commitments rather than its core business struggles. Ahead of Capital Markets Day, Reuters broke the news that BP's chief executive would abandon a target to increase renewable generation 20-fold by 2030, returning the company's focus to fossil fuels. But new analysis shows that BP has been misleading investors and the public through relentless media campaigns about the real reason for the massive profit loss and subsequent layoffs. A closer look at the data reveals that BP's financial setbacks in 2024 and early 2025 are more closely tied to the oil market's volatility and mismanagement of fossil fuels assets rather than its low carbon investments. So, they were, in a previous chapter, I was talking about Whole Foods and about that conscious capitalism. And like they were trying to blame the conscious capitalism for the demise of Whole Foods without looking at it that it's really actually capitalism that was the demise of Whole Foods, because it was Whole Foods doing so well in the organic food industry that the big chains decided, oh, we'll just beef up our organic and we'll sell it for cheaper. So, like that was the real reason why Whole Foods had to be bought out by Amazon.
Aldi's built Whole Foods, right?
Yeah.
like basically.
Yeah.
No, the greenwashing literal oil companies is wild to me. Where they're like, oh yeah, but BP, they started doing green energy stuff, and it, like when you look into it, like I remember looking into a Shell who invested really heavily into like offshore wind because they were using offshore wind turbines to power their offshore oil rigs because it's like cheaper than having to and like more consistent power than having to like ship like diesel generators and make those run out in the middle of the ocean where they're like not designed to, and like they're trying to get like other sources of energy or like burning crude rather than like refined stuff because it's like cheaper to like not have to ship it back in and refine it and ship it back out and like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were using it. They were using it to do that, to like power their offshore assets. And
that's
too
like, funny.
All this green energy we built and they're using to drill for oil.
It's so funny. And and that's and it's like I was saying, like it's all tied in too. Like for us to go to electric cars right now, like it's still fossil fuel to get that energy to charge the battery, and then the stuff that comes from the battery is the stuff that's getting pulled out of the ground by these the stuff that Elon Musk is trying to coup for.
Yeah,
So
trying to coup Bolivia.
yeah.
Um, so just recently, BYD cut a deal with, or China and Brazil cut a deal where they're building a BYD plant in Brazil, and I'm wondering if they're going to build the batteries there too, and if that's like what is going to end up happening. Because like they tried to coup Bolivia, and then he uncooed like they like installed this lady who was like a nightmare who like brought back like child
Yeah.
labor.
Yeah.
Like she was in for like 2 years in the interim after they like overthrew Morales when he tried to take power in a third term, and then
Yeah.
they re-elected the same party now, and so now they're back under MAS, like MAS, and
Yeah.
they have arson now and again, and they are doing like cartel, like lithium cartel shit with like Chile and what's the other country that has Peru, I think.
Peru, yeah, I was gonna say Peru.
Triangle there, and so I don't know. I think that we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mining is fucked kind of no matter. There's like no good way about it. Like nobody, everybody's like, oh, we have better methodologies, but I don't know. Like pulling stuff out of the ground is always gonna fuck shit up.
Yeah, I mean, even with the China stuff, like it's still, like hurting the ground, like pulling it all out. So, it's not, how much do we need? Is there other things that we can look at into? Like, I'd prefer them starting to look in other ways to create stuff, but I'm not worried about Elon not getting his robots. I don't know. Are you worried about it?
I don't think we need.
I don't.
Also, like, I don't think we need that many more robots. We're like already producing enough right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like, there was a study that said like, I think they could give everybody like an American middle class standard of living for like 1/5 the resources that we're producing right now.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, like you just even looking at the healthcare numbers too, like that we're overspending in our healthcare too. You know what I mean? Like there's so much that could be. Well, I don't. Well, American, we don't want the healthcare from America though. What am I saying? Like, we want a better healthcare. So, but yeah, no, I know what you're saying because everything is so much more expensive here and stuff. Hello, David. By the way. I just had to say hello because he said hello. Because I have to say hello to people when they say hello to me in the comments. Yeah, so, yeah. Do you want to listen to section 4?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Government for the Despoilers. With the fate of the planet at stake, the US government's response has been less than inspiring. The Safe Drinking Water Act remains haphazardly enforced. The Clean Air Act became a bonanza for coal producers, who were given billions of dollars ostensibly to clean up their act. And the Endangered Species Act, one of the world's toughest wildlife preservation laws, has proven largely ineffectual, with failures mounting faster than successes. People exposed to atmospheric nuclear tests and the contaminating clouds vented from continued underground tests have suffered a variety of serious illnesses. Nuclear mishaps have occurred at reactors in a dozen states. In the area around 3 Mile Island, Pennsylvania, livestock aborted and died prematurely, and households experienced what amounts to an epidemic of cancer, birth defects, and premature deaths. Nuclear power plants are so hazardous that insurance companies refuse to cover them, and they are too expensive to attract corporate investors. The average 2-reactor nuclear power plant is estimated to cost upwards of $18 billion to build, and that is before cost overruns. The carbon imprint created. The last environment 97. By the manufacturing of the nuclear plants themselves, the production of energy rods, the cooling towers, and the need for vast amounts of cooling water demonstrate that nuclear energy is no answer to global warming. Still, nuclear power plants continue to be built, with Congress shelling out billions of dollars in tax credits, federal loan guarantees, insurance, and direct subsidies. For decades, the government knowingly let uranium and other lethal substances leak into the groundwater and drinking wells. It has allowed private industry and the military to deposit radioactive nuclear wastes into ocean dumps and prime fishing beds along the ocean coasts of the United States. The Department of Energy has no known safe method of disposing of radioactive waste. We were told that nuclear power would be clean and inexpensive. In fact, the construction of nuclear plants involved cost overruns of 400 to 1,000%, often bringing higher rather than lower electric rates. The nuclear industry has no long-term technology for the entombment or decontamination of old plant sites. Thousands of tons of slightly radioactive metal from reactors and laboratories are being considered for recycling, to be used in such common items as zippers, food cans, and silverware. Nuclear industry representatives assure us that the effect of such radioactive commodities on human health would be negligible. 30. The federal government's Environmental Protection Agency has conducted almost no basic research on the long-term health effects of pollution. EPA monitors only about 1% of the 70,000 different synthetic chemicals and metals in commercial use. State and federal officials take action in less than 2% of the thousands of annual environmental complaints, and usually only after prolonged public agitation forces them to do what they are being paid to do. Various state governments have adopted legislation that allows corporate polluters to monitor themselves, without having to tell authorities or the public the results. The government sometimes collaborates with the polluters. The Bush administration slashed the budgets of the EPA and the U.S. Forest Service and removed wilderness protections. Politically appointed agency heads suppressed scientific information about the damage done to ecology and wildlife. The Inspector General of the EPA reported that the agency failed to fully assess the health impacts of mercury pollution because Bush appointees intervened and compromised the study. New rules instituted by Bush Jr. allowed coal-fired plants to expand without installing modern air pollution control equipment to reduce mercury and other emissions. Over the last decade, the White House slashed funding for environmental science and stacked scientific committees with members dedicated to the government's pro-industry, anti-environment agenda. Government departments accepted industry-sponsored reports that denied any environmental crisis, while rejecting more worrisome independent studies from universities and other research institutions. The Department of the Interior opened millions of acres of national parks and forests to strip mining. The Army Corps of Engineers opened 60 million acres of wetlands to private developers. The Corps has spent more than $25 billion in this century building dams and levees that have left a bleak legacy of ecologically ravaged rivers, silted lakes thick with dead fish, and destruction of wildlife and plant habitats. The Corps' efforts at containing rivers in narrowly corseted waterways has only intensified their velocity and frequency of floods. Corporate polluters are more often rewarded than punished. The Defense Department has paid private defense contractors upwards of $1 billion to clean up pollution from their own operations. When the Energy Department does impose cash penalties on contractors who violate its safety rules, the companies are then allowed to bill the government for the fines.
Okay, so did you have anything you want to talk on that? Because I was just going to read from the book Prophet Pathology.
No, go for it.
All right. Okay, so I talked about this book. I've read it from it before. I just got it. It's one of the Michael Parenti books I did not read, and it's one of his ones that has a bunch of essays and stuff in it. I think you call them essays. That's what I call them. I don't know. So this is actually the last chapter. Is called Prophet Pathology in the Disposable Planet, and the book is Prophet Pathology and Other Indecencies. So I'm just going to read from the beginning. Some years ago Sorry, I have to get in the light right. Some years ago in New England, a group of environmentalists asked a corporate executive how his company, a paper mill, justified dumping its raw industrial affluent into the nearby river. The river, which had taken Mother Nature hundreds of centuries to create, had been used for drinking water, fishing, boating, and swimming. But in just a few years, the paper mill turned it into a highly toxic open sewer. The executives shrugged and said that river dumping was the most cost-effective way of removing the mill's waste. If the company had to absorb the additional expense of having to clean up after itself, it might not be able to maintain its competitive edge and would then have the private sector then boast of its... Wait a sec. Haha, I messed up, sorry. Then have to go out to business or move to a cheaper labor market. resulting in the loss of jobs for the local economy. So the first section is called Free Market Uber Alice. It was a familiar argument. The company had no choice. It was compelled to act that way in a competitive free market. Such are the blessings of competition. The mill was not in the business of protecting the environment, but in the business of making a profit, the highest possible profit. The overriding purpose of private enterprise is capital accumulation. As business leaders make clear when pressed on the point, profit is the name of the game. We have been asked to believe that in the paradise of laissez-faire capitalism, the most avaricious individuals in pursuit of the most irresponsible self-serving ends can ride bronco across a wide-open free market, unbridled and unrestrained, while miraculously producing optimal outcomes beneficial for all of society. Tell it to the miserable victims of world poverty. So you can read more of that out of his book, but so they don't have to worry about this stuff. So like what Rick was talking about before about like if only they like put some thought into it and actually planned ahead, like they would know like, all right, we don't need to be pulling all this stuff out right now. Like we don't need it all right now. We could, we can do this, we can do that, like we have other things to worry about, but because in capitalism, the corporations, they're all they want is profit and their shareholders, and that's the only people they care about. Anything to add, Rick?
I mean, when you talk about mining in particular, it's always a short-term thing. And I see it happening right here in my community. They're trying to put in another copper mine. This place is like known historically for being a mining place. They've had like copper mines and iron and stuff here, and they're trying to bring back a copper mine. I think they actually managed to get an American company. Every once in a while, somebody will come sniffing around about the mine, and like there was a Australian company and there was a Chinese company, and like I think finally there's an American company that's going to build one.
Jesus.
And it like they're like, if everything goes really well, we can dig underneath Lake Superior for more copper. Like dig, it's like what could go wrong, right?
Yeah,
like,
nothing at all. Nothing at all could go wrong with that.
It's ridiculous. But like a bunch of people are like, oh, but the jobs and stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, but like they say the mine is going to be there for 30 years, and then they're going to be out of copper, and then what?
Yeah.
It's like you think a single generation, like a single generation. That's it. That's just going to get jobs there. And it's like going to be like not that many jobs even because like they're doing it like you saw with mountaintop removal. They're just like going to carve out a huge section of the side of this hill, and they're going to take all the copper out of it, and then they're going to leave a big giant pool of toxic bullshit next to the lake, and it should be fine as long as there isn't 100-year flood anytime in the next, I don't know, all of eternity. Like it's short-sighted. And when you think about it, like there's so much copper still to recycle. Like if they just like went through and fixed the problem we were talking about before, the piping and the old piping, they could replace a lot of the copper piping with stuff that is more safe, that doesn't have like lead solder joints, which a lot of the older copper stuff does, right? And it's like they could fix that and then get a big pile of copper, but that would take like public intervention and like working together with other industries and other sectors of society that are not for profit to like come up with like a long-term plan how to access resources.
My father, so he was an engineer, so he has to do the army because he gets drafted right out of there, and then he starts working at some corporations, but he wanted to move away. Like his first job was at Raytheon, and he wanted to move away from that. Like he didn't want to be associated because, of course, he was an engineer in the army, so they kind of he wasn't in the Army Corps of Engineers. He was in like another section of it, and they wanted him to work on war machines, and he just didn't want to do that after. So but it was like he got into like a lot of printing and stuff like that, and making like the printers for, so like so he started getting into that, and so he was working like on compute, like some of the first home computers and stuff like that, but he was working on the like the printer side. And he tells me the story of one day the company was right on the Charles River, and they had him go down to the river and dump this vat of toxic stuff, like have him walk down there with it to dump it.
It's like Captain Planet cartoon levels of like dumb shit that you have to do in the real life.
It
No,
was
but like this is real stuff. No, people are like, just dump it down the storm drain. Like
Yeah, let's just make it go away. We don't have to see it. It won't hurt us at all. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just, it amazes me how much, but like, I mean, even as a child, like, even thinking about, like, I kind of knew, like, the trucks, they were coming down and they were spraying, and like, in my head, because my mother was kind of like, oh, coming in the house, I'm like, this isn't good. What they're doing isn't good. And so it's, yeah, I mean, I'm asthmatic. I have horrendous asthma. My lungs are crap, and, I have to wonder how much of that was, things from my childhood, or like I said, like that my father or mother were exposed to. So, all right, let's listen to the last bit.
An alternative approach. In the face of an impending ecological catastrophe of global magnitude, growing numbers of people have been developing organic agriculture and environmentally sustainable energy sources. Throughout the world, be it ecological logging in Guatemalan rainforests or high-nutrition chemical-free, clean rice in Vietnam, there is a growing consciousness about the advantages of organic production. Cuba has provided the most dramatic example of an entire nation turning to organic farming, by force of circumstance. No longer able to count on Soviet aid in the 1990s, and unable to import chemicals or modern farming machines, the Cubans returned to oxen for plowing, while discarding chemical pesticides and herbicides. They also developed integrative natural pest management and networks of urban food gardens, all with much success. One study found that chicken farmers in Denmark did just as well or better after eliminating the use of antibiotics in feed. Likewise, tomato farmers in Florida earned much more per acre after switching from methyl bromide to Bahia grass pasture. Thousands of farmers in the United States have abandoned chemical farming and have turned to organic methods, soon achieving larger yields at less cost by using crop rotation, natural pest control, and non-chemical fertilizers, methods that revitalize the soil. They get little if any assistance from the Department of Agriculture, which is too busy serving agribusiness and chemical farming. Organic farming means no profits for Monsanto and other chemical companies. Today, growing numbers of people in this country and around the world rely on solar devices. Wind and solar power plants in California provide power for about 1 million people. They can be built faster and cheaper than nuclear or fossil fuel plants and have no toxic emissions. Renewable non-polluting energy provides about 7.5% of this country's energy production. 12 states in the Great Plains have a wind energy potential greater than the electric use of our entire nation. However, recent administrations have done little to develop these alternative sources. Despite its smaller economy, Japan spends almost 8 times more on solar energy research and development than the United States. The last environment 99. Solar, wind, and tidal energy sources would be readily accessible if government and corporations devoted more resources to their development. A new generation of high-efficiency windmill turbines are becoming the fastest-growing energy source in parts of Europe, Latin America, and India. The hydrogen fuel cell, as with nuclear energy, is misleadingly hailed as a non-polluting alternative source. It comes from an oil derivative and emits carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. So too with ethanol, a corn-based fuel described by the Council of Economic Advisers and Federal Trade Commission as costly to both consumers and the government and will provide little environmental benefit. It will cost even more than regular gasoline. In sum, things work best for big business when costs are socialized and profits are privatized. Government is an insufficient bulwark against the baneful effects of giant corporate capitalism and often a willing handmaiden. Why that is so will be examined in later chapters. Of utmost importance are the serious contradictions that exist between our well-being and the profit-driven corporate system. Big businesses' modus operandi is to produce and sell at an ever-expanding rate, treating the world's resources as limitlessly expendable. But the Earth is finite, as is its water supply, oxygen, topsoil, and ability to absorb toxins and heat from energy consumption. An infinitely expanding capitalism and a fragile, finite ecology are on a calamitous collision course. Our very survival hangs in the balance.
Okay, so that was section 5, and as promised, that's called the oh my God, Rick, I can't talk right now. Alternative approach. Okay, China and the U.S. have been, taking different approaches to combating pollution, with China focusing on centralized top-down initiatives, and U.S. Relying more on market-based mechanisms and bottom-up approaches. So China has implemented aggressive policies like closing down polluting industries, implementing low emission zones, and investing heavily in renewable energy. The U.S., while also enacting regulations, emphasizes voluntary programs, market-based incentives, and state-level action. And as Parenti was saying there, you can't really leave it up to their hands, right? So, like, China's approach is centralized, and that's like, so it comes from the government, like the main government, and they make sure that everyone's following the regulations and everything like that. And where U.S. is decentralized, like they're like leaving it to the states, and sometimes they're leaving it to the corporations. Like, it's just
Part of it also, like China having a manufacturing economy, like having an industrial economy where like you can like come up with something in the lab and then try applying it immediately to the production line and see if it works, and then getting that feedback and then taking it back to the lab. That whole cycle goes a lot faster when like the person who's doing the research is like in the same building as where the solar panels are getting made or the batteries are getting made or whatever. And like it's like there's like a whole lot of like, yeah, just in general, like public investment, things like education matter a lot. Like having more engineers, having more people who are like able to do the thing, and having that sort of, yeah, like an
yeah,
actual long term plan to know that like this much energy will be bought in this time, and we'll know exactly, because like the state's going to be building the infrastructure to carry it and the communities that are going to be using it, and like knowing everything ahead of time helps a lot when you're doing that kind of research.
yeah, like just the planning alone is a huge thing. They also have like these low emission zones where they like certain vehicles, and like you just can't travel there with certain vehicles, like, so they leave those zones to be much cleaner. We allow we don't have anything like that here, so
Well, they also they limited the number of vehicles that could be driven, like a lot, largely because of like there's only so many parking spaces, and unlike in the US, they're not just going to like turn everything into a parking lot.
yeah,
And then also like there was like they were having emissions problems, like severe ones, like the same things that like the US was having in the 80s and the 90s with like the smog in like the cities out west, and where California had to pass all these emissions rules, not because of the environment at large, but because like people's quality of life was actually being affected directly. Like you
yeah,
couldn't go out, and they had that same issue in China, and they um for a long time, I think they actually changed it recently, but for a long time they had the limit on license plates, which is just a common in the region.
hmm,
They like anybody could get a green license plate. It was like cheaper, and so if you had electric vehicle, you could get a vehicle easier. You didn't have to jump through as many hoops. Like
uh,
you have the parking space for it and all that. You could just get one. And
yeah,
having a lot of, yeah, just like a lot of government funding that was like actually like looked into. People were paying attention to where it was going. It wasn't just going to stock buybacks. Um, yeah, long term plans
yeah.
actually works.
I
And
mean, yeah, that's the major part of it. Like, oh, I did want to bring up like the Cuba thing. Like, I talked to someone about like that, them doing the urban gardens and stuff. Like they actually brought in people from Australia to show them how to do all that. Like they brought in experts to do all the urban gardening and stuff, and it was really neat, like how they implemented that. But yeah, getting back to China, like even just like they're doing like a forestation, like they're they're putting up a lot more forests and stuff like that. They're trying to rebuild those up too, where I don't know. We have Trump that wants to roll back everything and not have any restrictions. But overall, we don't. We always given into the corporations. Like even when we were looking at that example of the place in 2015 that you know only paid 13 million in fines because they didn't pay for 10 years, or they didn't they the fines for the 10 years, and yeah, they still made out in the deal, and there's that company is still around too. It's not like in China where we were talking about the mining and the small companies that were actually doing a lot of damage because they weren't using they weren't following the regulations or using the new methods. They are no longer in business. So yeah, I mean, but the planning for like everything is huge. Like we just don't do that in a capitalist state. We don't plan for crap.
Well, because you can't count on it. You can't count on a plan because things could change, and that's like one of the things people are talking about. The tariffs is like, okay, even if you were to be like, okay, I want to build a factory in the U.S. because of the tariffs, how would you know it would be worth it? Because in 3 years you might have a different president who gets rid of the tariffs,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you're out of business. And so, how do you know what's like whether or not that's going to be a good investment? That's a huge gamble, right? And
yeah. When you
uh,
watch, yeah, I would say like even as a corporation and you're watching this like every 4 years, you know, Trump does all this stuff and then Biden rolls it back and then Trump's backing up. Like you're gonna be like, I don't know. Like even there, like not that I really feel bad for the corporations, but I mean, they must be even kind of like, I don't know, like how to handle this because, but then again, they always win out in the end anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Somehow they always make their money, so I don't know. But yeah, that was his chapter 8. Chapter 9 I'll be doing on Thursday, and Thursday is May Day. You should come for that one. I want to do a little I want to do a little labor, a little even though I don't know what's the next chapter. Hey, look, I unequal before the law. So yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about labor and stuff too. So, but you're welcome to come up anytime, Rick.
I might, I might be working though.
Yeah, yeah.
But
If you're not working, you can come up because I actually sent to you I sent you the schedule, the chapters and everything. So if you want to look over that, and if there's any time that you want to come up and talk a little bit more on something, um, I love having you up here because you add a lot to it. So
I like speaking about the environmental stuff. I feel like it gets put to the wayside because there's so many things that feel more urgent than that. But like at the same time, a lot of the urgent things are that way because of climate change, or like are directly affected because of that. Things like
yeah, do
war,
you
food.
remember when the climate was urgent though? Like, do you remember when like and it just felt like it's just fallen through the cracks now? Like ever since like the climate was urgent up until Trump got into the office the first time, like till 2016.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing is like eco-fascism is the future of the right wing.
Yeah.
It's kind of their only option, and as of now, the right doesn't even do much climate science denial anymore.
No, they just don't care. I mean, they never cared, but they try to
But now
cover it
that's
up
like
with,
the
yeah,
position is to be like, it's gonna get hot. Oh well. They're like the climate changes, whatever. Who cares what causes it? Like,
yeah.
we'll just
But
deal with it when it comes, right? Like
buy
that's
more
the
AC. Buy like oh, you just have to buy more things from us to make yourself
no.
feel better.
No, they're like, we'll just take Canada and Greenland then. No biggie. That's the plan.
Mm,
That's the fucking plan. They're like, oh, like you mean the Arctic shipping routes open up? Great, awesome, good for us.
God. Yeah, it's just I'm not like I'm not big on like I don't talk a lot about the environmental stuff, but like I always kind of paid attention. I just remember like in my whole life because like the 1970s is really where like Earth Day, what was Earth Day 1970, right? So I think that's when it started. So like I just remember it just being I don't know, just around so much more, like people talking about it a little bit more. Now it's just like, it's hot.
I was listening to a thing about Earth Day recently, and I didn't realize it's like I think that the environmental movement showed like could really clearly show the failures of liberalism
Yeah.
because like the idea behind Earth Day was to give trees legal rights. Like what if trees had rights like humans have rights, like
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
rights councils, and like the initiative, they're like, what if we gave them legal rights and you could sue on behalf of the environment? That's how we're gonna fix
Yeah.
not by like, I don't know, getting together and collectively organizing our society in ways that like,
Yeah,
you know,
Sue. We're gonna be litigious about it. We're not going to like make the
no,
changes. We're just gonna
we're just gonna wait for corporations to pillage the environment and then sue them, right? That was the big idea. That's Earth Day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
So
uh,
ridiculous.
yeah, no, it's very silly. Like this, that is the thing, and it's just like I can see why like the ELF was hanging out of trees. It makes sense because like that obviously wasn't going to work. The other option was never going to work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean like the redwoods, like what's left of the redwoods? Like a little tiny like 4% of them. It's it's just it's just I don't know. Like I like get into this thing, and I was just saying I was talking to Cutie about it. And I was like, I feel so weird because I studied engineering, right? So like I wanted to advance things, right? I wanted to learn how to make things and advance to new technologies and stuff like that, or whatever, whatever grand plan I had in my head when I went into engineering, and I like at times like I found myself like, ooh, we should go back. You know what I mean? Like we really shouldn't like be, but it's like I think with like the not having the planning and stuff is what it is. Like yes, I would like to get to automation and people not having to, put in, much physical labor and stuff like that. That would be lovely, but we can't do it under capitalism, like so it's more like, and that's the whole thing. So every time that my head went there when I was an anarchist and didn't think everything through, i I'd be like, why am I doing that? Because like I want some of this stuff, but then now I realize what it was actually the system. Like that is what makes me not want to do as much advancement as we do, because it just seems like they just use it as, everything that could be good is just being used to do bad, you know?
you come up with a cool new thing, and then they figure out how to make it help them,
Yeah.
blow the limbs off children.
Yep.
right? Like that's the yeah.
Nitrate was the big one. That yeah, they learned how
Yeah.
to use that as a super evil thing. But yeah, I mean,
But
I
it's
don't know.
also the reason we can feed everybody now.
Yeah, no, and that was like, but that was good. Like I like, would I want to get rid of it? No, like we should have that, but then people decided to go.
Well, and the process that they still use is one of the guys, because it's the Haber Bosch process, and what's his name, Haber
Hmm.
was a literal Yahtzee, yeah, like
Hmm.
German no party guy,
Yeah,
like uh,
yeah,
but yeah, that's like you can make. I mean, it is a brilliant like being able to make fertilizer from air. That's a big deal.
yeah. It is. It really
Um,
is. I mean, it's neat because like I love science. I love reading about science. I love advancements, but then like it just kind of plays on your head because you're like, whose hands are those in? Because this could go totally wrong. That's just where my head goes. But
yeah.
do you have anything else you want to talk on environment?
Uh, oh, there was one more thing about the electric vehicle thing. E- Even even if you're still just burning coal for your electricity, it's still like better if you add it all up. Just not as better as people like picture it being,
Yeah,
but it's just yeah, like you need public infrastructure to make that work. That's the thing, and we just don't have it, and that's the fucking problem. And yeah,
yeah,
that's the shitty thing.
yep. It really is. Yeah, we need to find a better ways to do this stuff, and we're not going to be able to do that in capitalism because capitalism doesn't care about better ways of doing stuff. They just care about the cheapest, most profitable, for them. So I don't know. I guess that's what I have to say about this chapter. So I think I'm gonna call it a night, and I'll be back on Thursday with chapter 9 and unequal before the law, and I think that will be a little bit longer one because I want to do a little bit more of some labor for May Day. I want to do a little labor history too. So I will talk to you guys all later. Thank you, Rick, for coming up.